Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up Florida. My name is Scott Morgan off Motor City Madmouth. Doesn't matter where the Motor City Madmouth is, I'm all over the country, but in Florida, wearing a South Florida Tribune cap, appropriately named. Please be joined by Greg Fuchs. Welcome back, Greg.
Glad to be here.
Madman Mancini.
Always a pleasure to be a part of this, man. The show that's sweeping the country.
Yeah, we're sweeping the country all, and we're going to re-nickname Madman Guinness Mancini because he is a Guinness Book of World Records of being on podcasts. Okay. All right. At any rate, Avi Greenwald, welcome back.
Appreciate it. Excited to be here with you, wonderful gentlemen. Thank you for having me on.
Our
Excited
pleasure.
to go forward.
All right, Greg. Well, we know the drill. We talked about it. I'll let you lead off with the Dolphins. But the main whole idea is we're going to be talking about the entire state of Florida. A lot of football took place over the weekend. So we're not limited to the Miami Dolphins. We have a lot of things to look forward to. But, Greg, take it away.
I'll be glad to take it away. What a game to talk about this week. I mean, the game's been over for 30 hours, but I am still on an emotional high after watching that Dolphin game yesterday. Just an exciting game, great ending. And most importantly, you walk away with the W. You can just look at the stats for this.
Yeah, we're go ahead, Greg.
Tua threw for 469 yards, 6 touchdowns, which is a Dolphins record. And who was he throwing to? Maybe the best wide receiver duo in the league. Both Hill and Waddle caught 11 passes. Like Hill had like 190 yards, Waddle 170 something. Both had 2 touchdowns. Just a phenomenal game. And despite all that offense, the Dolphins needed every of that offense because Lamar Jackson on the other side, people would be talking about Jackson today if Jackson just had a stellar game, threw for 319 yards, 3 touchdown passes. He also ran for 119, including a 79-yard touchdown run. And this game, I said it was exciting. This game was just littered with big plays. It all started the very first play of the game, a 103-yard kickoff return by Devin Duvernay. Then they had Ravens have a 75-yard touchdown pass to Rashad Bateman. But the Dolphins, unlike the last couple decades, I want to say, they had 6 plays over 20 yards yesterday. The touchdown passes to Hill were 60 and 48. Waddle, even though his 2 touchdown receptions weren't that long, he still had receptions of 59 and 33 yards. And then a play that goes unnoticed in that final game-winning drive, Chase Edmonds ran for 27 yards, which set up the final touchdown. And as exciting as all those stats were, the best part of the game was going into the fourth quarter, Dolphins were down 35-14, and everyone was – Dolphin fans are just used to this, coming up bad in the big games, and then just the offense took over. And to the defensive unit's credit, who did not play well yesterday, gave up 38 points, 473 yards, no sacks, no turnovers. But in the fourth quarter, they pretty much shut down the Ravens. So the Dolphins offense got that ball back, and they did something with it every single time. The defense had a big stop on 4th and 1, a bit of a gamble by Harbaugh. Dolphins got good field position at the 41-yard line. So absolutely fantastic game, and I was up in front of my TV just cheering them on that game-winning touchdown. As you can tell, I'm still fired up. So I'll turn it over to you guys to get your take on the game.
All right, well, before I do that, okay, here's another stat, and I know you said a lot of them, but from 2011 to 2022, teams trailing by 21-plus points in the fourth quarter had a record of 0-711. Now they're 1-711 after Miami's Week 2 comeback win. And if that wasn't enough, here, let's go ahead and add a little bit more. The Baltimore became the first team in 12 years to lose a game in which they led 21-plus points in the fourth quarter. And again, as I mentioned, the 711 stat as well. So that, to me, says an awful lot about what transpired there. And another thing about Tua, Tagovailoa, 6 passing touchdown, ties a franchise record. So not an awful lot of numbers to really bite off in that sequence. So with that said, Mark Mancini, go ahead and give us your take on what took place with the Dolphins.
Well, they must have heard our show last week because they took notes. And we were talking about the Jason Taylors. We were talking about the Zach Thomases. We were talking about can Tua lead this team to the promised land. Quite a different contrast from the New England game when they couldn't really stop New England and they won that game, but they had problems. And then they carried over for the first 3 quarters of this game. But whatever they did in the fourth quarter, that's what you need to bottle up and save and drink each and every week and showcase to the rest of these guys in order to be successful, in order to win this division, in order to move in the playoffs and get to the championship and the Super Bowl. We need to take the fourth quarter and utilize that in each and every one of these games. And to beat Baltimore in their backyard, that's tough because a Harbaugh team is well prepared each and every week.
Javi?
Well, another good stat also that you forgot to leave out, or you left out. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle become the first teammates in the Super Bowl era to each have at least 170 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns in a game. Very impressive night by these guys as well.
So why?
Yes, there's certain things like Greg mentioned earlier. Huge play calls from the coach. Execution. What a call. 44 seconds left. Edmonds with a 27-yard run to get us down inside the 10 with about 38 seconds left in the clock. Just execution. Tua was finding rhythm. The trust in each other, just the calls, everything together. The whole team together came together as a group. Was very impressed. I'll tell you what. I'll be honest. The beginning of the game, I was ready to write Tua off. I just was not impressed again starting off. But you know what? At the end of the day, he was finding rhythm and he was executing, and he really put it together yesterday. Like I said, the whole team as a group really brought it together. Huge play calls, huge execution from the guys. Absolutely.
You know the best part about having multiple people on a show? If any of us forget a stat, you always have a cell phone or somebody else coming up with it, so we're not going to miss any stats. So in this modern day of electronics and technology, as they always say, no stone gets unturned. I always say no stat gets missed. How do you like that? And you're talking about a guy that's only been in the business for 42 years when I had to depend on AP and UPI to get my stuff in the old ticker. Folks, this has replaced the ticker. Okay. All right, Greg, continue on with the rest of your topics tonight.
Yeah, my last thought on the Dolphins, Mike McDaniel's got a challenge ahead of him because he's known as a run-first play caller. But when you got Hill and Waddle on your team, don't run too much, guys. They're 2 of the best players in the NFL. So let's pivot real quick to the world of college football. All the college pro teams were in action over the weekend. Started off on Friday night game, FSU, Louisville. Went back and forth. Bad news for Seminole fans. Their quarterback went down, Jordan Travis, in the second quarter. But the replacement, Tate Rodemaker, led down on 3 75-yard scoring drives in the second half. So a big win over a decent Cardinal team. And we talked about Lamar Jackson. We all know he went to Louisville. And they almost have Louisville has almost a Lamar Jackson clone at quarterback in Malik Cunningham. He threw for 243 yards, ran for 127, and accounted for 3 touchdown passes. FSU is now 3-0, and they are hosting Boston College, so 4-0 is staring them in the face. Florida Gators, they won, but it wasn't pretty. They were a 24.5-point favorite, and they got outplayed. But as often is the case in football, turnovers can kill you. And the Gators defense had a pick 6, and then they had a fourth quarter interception that led to the game-winning touchdown. And even that, USF almost tied it up at the end, but they missed a 49-yard field goal with 23 seconds to go. Gators are now ranked 20th in the country, I believe, and they got a big game this week on the road at 11th-ranked Tennessee. The one bad part of Miami sports weekend, the Miami Hurricanes. I had a previous engagement. I did not get to see this game, but I've read a lot about it. And Miami outplayed Texas A&M. They outgained them 392 yards, and they held Texas A&M to 264. They had 27 first downs versus 15 for the Aggies. But one of my favorite phrases in football is death by field goals. Because every time you settle for a field goal, you're giving up a potential 4 extra points. They settled for field goals 5 times, missed 2 of them, and that just absolutely killed them. They also had some untimely penalties, and they had a muff punt, which led to one of Texas A&M's 2 touchdowns. So, big game on the road. I think there was 107,000 people in the stands. Canes played well. They moved the ball. They just could not get the ball in the end zone, which, is a big part of football. And the other Florida game was 2 Florida schools. I think, Scott, you went to this game.
Yeah,
Florida versus FAU up in Boca. And the Owls kept it close. It was 16-14 at the halftime, but they just got smoked in the second half, 24-0. And on the stat sheet, Central Florida just dominated, 653 yards to 296. And for all the Canes fans out there who forget where N'Kosi Perry went, well, he's the starting quarterback for FAU now. Did not have a great game, 108 yards only passing with 1 touchdown. FAU travels to Purdue next week. UCF plays Georgia Tech. So that's my college football wrap up. So I'll turn it back to you guys to get your thoughts.
Well, actually, why don't you go with the pro, and then I'm going to break them down game by game.
All right. Well, the other 2 pro teams in Florida both had exciting games, 2 wins. Jacksonville, who should have won in week 1 versus the Commanders, but they blew it. They just dominated the Colts. And the Colts, every time they come to Jacksonville, they do not play well for whatever reason. Trevor Lawrence might have had his best game as a pro, 25 of 30, 235 yards, 2 touchdown passes, both to Christian Kirk. James Robinson had a 39-yard touchdown run. But the defense was a big part of this win. They held Jonathan Taylor to 54 yards, and they intercepted Matt Ryan 3 times. So after 2 weeks, the Jags are looking good. They go on the road against the Chargers this week, so they have a tough game right there. Tampa Bay, this was against the Saints. This was a baseball game for the first 3 quarters. It was 3-3. And then Tampa runs off a 17 straight points to begin the 4th quarter. But this game was really, when we talk about Tampa, you used to talking about Tom Brady. This game was totally about the Tampa defense. They intercepted Winston 3 times in the 4th quarter alone. They also recovered 2 fumbles. They sacked the quarterback 6 times. So a dominating performance by Tampa's defense. Tampa's offense, they were missing some linemen. They were missing Godwin. And then, as I'm about to get to, Mike Evans got kicked out part of the way through the game. And this might have been the big video highlight of the entire NFL this week, was that brawl, which was initiated by Marshawn Lattimore and Tom Brady just jawing at each other. Then some pushing and shoving, and then Evans just came out and blasted Lattimore. Evans ended up getting suspended, if you hadn't heard that today, for 1 game. I was a little surprised if both of them didn't get suspended, because they got a long history of doing stuff on the field you shouldn't be doing. So I was a little surprised Lattimore also didn't get suspended. But that Evans running off the sideline and just blasting Lattimore, that was just too much, I guess, for the NFL, and they suspended Evans.
All right, so the games we're talking about, I'll take it from here. Thank you very much, Greg. Obviously, Florida State coaching situation. Greg's a little bit more settled down. What's his name? Mike, the Florida State coach?
Neville?
Yeah, Neville. Thank you. Finally getting things settled down a little bit of uncertainty after Jimbo Fisher and Willie Taggart left. So I'm glad, he's a proven coach. People up in Tallahassee need to go ahead and just relax a little bit. They've been spoiled with the success that Bobby Bowden had, Jimbo Fisher, and I know Willie Taggart left there. He didn't really think out very long, and he cited that part of the reasons he ended up leaving because of academic thing. But I think Florida football is a lot better when Florida State's better, right, Avi?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. Absolutely. Yeah, everybody's on the board for sure. Everyone's with it.
Okay. All right. Mark, any thoughts about Florida State? Because we have a lot of games to get to.
No, I mean, I don't have nothing on Florida State, but I sure would like to add something on that Miami, Texas.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment.
My apologies. One thing I did want to bring up on the Florida State game, I'd say that Florida State really pulled it off at the end. Big day from Louisville quarterback Malik Cunningham, rushing and throwing the ball. Really had a big day. That guy's seriously talented. Florida State should be really proud of themselves for shutting that down and getting the W after a huge game from Malik, for sure.
All right. The only thing I'm going to mention here about the Florida USF game. I know not everybody's going to be familiar with all games, so we'll just go through them and hit a lot of the main ones. I'm proud of my alma mater for USF for at least playing tough with the Gators. Here's a team like you mentioned, big underdogs, right, Greg?
Yep.
And I think let's go with the line again. What was it?
24 and a half point underdog.
Right. That's a lot. And USF is falling on hard times. And I'm just glad that Jeff Scott, he needs to see some success there to get our alumni base going. And I'm glad that they walked into Gainesville and gave the Gators a game. And I believe that the Gators dropped 1 or 2 ratings points because of the fact that USF game. I don't value ratings early in the year anyway, so don't put any stock in that. So, but let's face the reality: a 49-yard field goal, 23 seconds from tying it, nearly gave USF an opportunity to win. All right, Mark, I know you're more comfortable talking about the Miami Hurricanes. Mark, so we'll move on to that one. Give me your thoughts about the Miami Hurricanes.
Well, and the Florida one I could jump on too, but the Miami
right,
one.
Well, go ahead, Mark. Jump on Florida first, and then you can go to Miami.
It doesn't matter. Let me
go ahead. That's the order that we're in.
Okay,
Florida.
let me talk about Florida. Florida has a big game, like Greg alluded to, and Tennessee's no pushover here. And if you don't show up against these guys, it could be a long afternoon. The Gators got a proud football tradition there, but Tennessee is. If you looked at some of their games this year, they just manhandle you, and that's the big problem here. Being number 11, they're surprising some people. So Florida's going to have to show up.
Well, Josh Heupel's a good coach too. I believe he previously went from Central Florida with Tennessee. I think he even got an extension. So I think the Tennessee program is a lot better hands. All right, Mark, continue on to your Miami thought.
Well, the Miami one, like Greg was talking about, you get in that red zone, that falls on somebody, whether it's the offensive coordinator or Cristobal or somebody. You get in there 5 times and you're kicking field goals, that's a big problem. That's points being taken off the scoreboard. So I think this loss either falls on the offensive coordinator or it falls on Cristobal. So just to lose that game, I don't know, a little disheartening in my book.
Yeah, Josh Gaddis is an excellent offensive coordinator. And you have to understand, though, in this game, I believe Xavier Restrepo is out for a substantial period of time, and he's a big part of their offense, too. So, you take a lot of things into consideration. I also look at the fact that the Aggies obviously had a chip on their shoulder after losing to App State, and there's a lot of things. But, yeah, that game was definitely there for the Hurricanes to win. I'll be curious to see what kind of adjustments they make when they take on Middle Tennessee State on Saturday, which Candy Abley and I will be at as well. So, Avi, any thoughts about the Florida-Miami games?
Florida's got a big hurdle to cross, especially after that huge loss to Kentucky a week ago. This close one to South Florida. I definitely believe this is it right here. They're going to have to really show up against Tennessee. If they don't pull something off here, really show a mark. I don't know how much further they're going to be able to go in the season. It's not looking very good. The Canes, on the other hand, again, it looked like they should have had that game. They had the time of possession last game. They just weren't efficient on third down. They weren't making plays when they had to. The Canes are going to have to prove themselves going forward.
Okay. All right. So any thoughts about the Miami? All right. So summarize the fact that we have 2 games. Which one stood out the most between Florida and Miami to you, Avi?
Obviously, I'd want to say the Canes. It looked like the Canes really had some control in that game, but they just really couldn't pull it off. Florida had a point to prove, but I think the Canes stood out. I really thought they had a chance in that game, but unfortunately they didn't pull it off.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, we'll go to the game that Greg mentioned it before, UCF FAU. FAU hung with them for a quarter, and I'm glad you brought up N'Kosi Perry. And here's a little piece of information about N'Kosi Perry. When he played for the Miami Hurricanes against Savannah State, he threw for 3 touchdown passes in that 77-0 rout over Savannah State, which is the highest margin of error ever in a game by the Hurricanes and N'Kosi Perry. So, I think the one thing I noticed about FAU is they got 2 good running backs. I know Larry McCammon. The third is a good running back to watch out for. And a guy named Zabarius Mobley is another one. So I think the FAU running attack is good. But let's face it, I think they can't scheme up flat on national television, and that was an absolute embarrassment. It is. I saw it with my own two eyes, and this is an opportunity for FAU on the national stage to show something. I even thought they had a chance to win this game, and you want to talk about laying an egg. And I think what's worse about the FAU situation is when you think about their first three opponents, they end up beating Charlotte, obviously a conference opponent. I'm not going to hold that one against them. They lose to Ohio, I think 41-38 up in Athens, Ohio, and then Southeast Louisiana. You schedule them, and you think I'm going to sit here and buy into that? Now you get an opportunity to go ahead. I'll refer you in a moment, Mark, okay, to go ahead and take on UCF and now Purdue. So we'll find out how good FAU really is, okay, because these first three games on the schedule to me are a joke. All right, Mark, go ahead.
Well, and not to switch gears on this, but if you want to be prominent, you want to play with the big boys, you can't just rely on tradition. Case in point, Penn State took out Auburn and SEC team this week. They went down there and pounded them there in their backyard. So that's what I'm looking at Miami. And there's no ever. You got to kick them where it counts. Just one man's thought.
That's okay. That's all right. That's what we have for. Everybody has a man's thought. Okay. Now, any other thoughts, Greg, about the UCF FAU game?
I just wanted to. Sorry, go ahead. Okay. I just wanted to make a point. I was watching that game, and I just wanted to point out Florida Atlantic just had some real problems passing the ball, moving the ball downfield. Their quarterback, N'Kosi Perry, just really just wasn't making it happen. He was only 13 for 29, 108 yards, the only one TD early in that first quarter, but not much for him. Just wasn't really finding his receivers. Really tough day. UCF just really manhandled him. So Florida Atlantic has a lot.
Yeah, he had a bad night. The only thing they had going was that first drive. Otherwise, it went south after that.
That's it. Yeah. But besides that, it was just real tough. UCF just steamrolled them. It's tough, but you know what? Florida Atlantic's going to have to prove themselves going against the big dogs these days. So we'll see what happens going forward as well.
Well, again, UCF, to me, now they're 0-4 all time against UCF, and now they get Purdue, a credible Big Ten team on the road. Greg, any closing thoughts before we hit the final two games?
My closing thought, I'll go back to the Hurricanes. I mean, their best player is supposed to be quarterback Tyler Van Dyke. He did not play well against Texas A&M. He did not play well last week. Some of that you might be able to blame on the receivers. It's probably the weakest position group on the entire team. And as you mentioned, Scott, they're missing their best receiver, Restrepo, for the next 6 weeks.
Right.
And they had a few drops on Saturday. But, Tyler Van Dyke, he's supposed to be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the country. He needs to figure out a way to get it done, get that ball in the end zone.
Okay. All right. Let's carry it over to the pro game here. Jacksonville. I had an opportunity last year to see the Jaguars beat the Colts, and Carson Wentz is no longer the scapegoat. That earned him a one-way ticket out of town last year. I remember the game all too well. Well, what are they going to do? Run Matt Ryan out of town? Although you never know, Frank Reich might be on the outs there. So, all right, Greg, we'll turn it over to you. Give me some of your quick thoughts about the Jacksonville beatdown of Indianapolis. I know that, to me, TIAA Bank Stadium is a house of horrors for the Colts.
I mean, a great two-way performance. Lawrence and the offense played well. The defense was outstanding. I've never been a huge Matt Ryan fan because there's just too many games like this game. I think he threw for 195 yards and 3 interceptions. People call him a Hall of Famer. He's not a Hall of Famer in my book. I'm sorry. He just has too many stinker games like that.
Yeah, I'm not going to anoint him a Hall of Famer. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I'm going to take a book out of the New York Jets coach, Rassan Salah. I'm taking receipts on some of these media guys that have ripped the Jags for years. I've been on the Jags wagon. I've done a little radio out of there. And I'll tell you one thing. I'm a big Trevor Lawrence guy. Doug Peterson's good. And I said it on XM Sirius that the Jags would hit the Super Bowl again before the Kansas City Chiefs come back there. And for all these people that have been knocking the Jags, these guys are putting it together. They've had 2 number 1 picks in back-to-back years, And let me tell you, they're building something. And you're talking about, playing the Chargers this week. Herbert could be out in that game, and that would give an advantage to the Jags. And not only that, they just seem to be making progress over regress each week. And whatever you do not put the Indianapolis Colts on a road trip to Jacksonville anytime soon. I think they've lost 9 straight there.
Right. Yeah. Mark, you bring up a handful of good points there. No, you do. I mean, listen, I saw it with my own 2 eyes last year. I did. I saw that Carson Wentz got run out of town. Everybody thought Carson Wentz, Frank Reich, great dynamic, great. Jim Irsay couldn't get him out of there quick enough. Turn the clock up. Guess what we have? Matt Ryan, 24-0. Thought it was bad last year. And then they landed. But you're right. You have a couple of years in a row. You had the number 1 pick, Trevor Lawrence, Trayvon Walker, a couple of people in the South, and all of a sudden the Jaguars. Listen, to me, Jacksonville is a market that's waiting to erupt. They really, really are. And I've seen them when they were playing well, when they made it all the way to the conference championship game against New England. And I'm going to tell you one thing, that fan base being the only game in town, that they put together competitive football with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence there, watch out. I'm with you all the way, Mark. Go ahead. What else do you have?
Well, I think this team, when they get it together with all the draft picks they got and everything, they're going to be better than the Mark Brunell, Leonard Fournette team that was devastating. Or you could throw Bortles in that one too. When they
Bortles did Mark guide them all the way to the
Yeah.
championship game, and with Fournette, I think it was a mistake that they ever let Fournette.
Yep, and
We
they
had a
lost to
different
New
regime
England. I
under
remember
David
that.
Caldwell and Tom Coughlin. We know where that's at. We're not getting into it. Obviously, you're closer to that situation in Jacksonville than you are some of the other ones. Give me your quick take on.
Well, first,
Jaguars are
don't
going.
mean to. First, I don't want to just quite toot the horn yet on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I'm not saying they didn't look great. First, I'll say money well spent in their eyes, at least for now, on Christian Kirk. Trevor Lawrence is. They really had something going. They had some real nice fluidity together, some great chemistry. It looked good. You know what? Travis Etienne might not be getting the touches right now with James Robinson kind of as the starter, but he looks good. He's catching the ball well, breaking out of the backfield really well. But I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to back to talking about Mark Brunell and the heydays of the Jacksonville Jaguars. That team was phenomenal. It's got Hall of Famers all over it, spread all over. Obviously now Tony Baselli, the first one. Jimmy Smith, I believe, is a Hall of Famer. Fred Taylor's obviously, I think, a Hall of Famer. You got to remember also, if you do remember, 1999, second round of the playoffs, the Jaguars at home retired Dan Marino. You remember that game? 62-7. I was actually at that game crying my eyes out. It was a terrible day, but, at the end of the day, Jaguars, it might be a short history, but they've got rich history. A little bit, not much to brag about, but you know what? They've been there. They have done that. As you said, the Blake Bortles days, obviously, I believe that defense might have been the real thing that carried them to where they got. Blake Bortles might have been the downfall to that team. But you know what? They look really good. Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, they got some talent going on right now. And I'm really looking to see if Josh Allen continues leading that defense. The Jaguars can really make some noise, especially with those young secondary. Tyson Campbell, very good team right now. I'm really looking forward to the Jaguars to see what they can do week to week.
All right, Mark, what do you got to say?
Well, and Avi brings up excellent points, and I can't wait to hear Greg's. But I will tell you this. I think they're going to win the division because Tennessee's a banged up team right now. They're really in dire straits. They don't have the pass rusher they lost in preseason. The Colts are trying to find themselves. I think they quit on Frank Wright here. That team has been in disarray, and Houston's just it's going to be a long year in Houston. Their Super Bowl could be when Deshaun Watson comes back when he's reinstated. But why not the Jags? And I think the Jags could win the division. And I'm going to throw a guarantee. They can call me the world's worst handicapper. I think Jacksonville's going to win this division.
All right, well, I'm sure
believe
that's
that.
unrealistic. So hold on. Let me say a few things. First of all, I'm not putting the Jags in the Super Bowl
No.
at all. But what I will tell you this, okay, and I know, Avi, let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay? Okay, but 3 conference championship games more than Dallas Cowboys have had the last several years under Jerry Jones. I mean, what do you got to say about that? But I know about the Jaguars. You got to start with Doug Peterson, the quarterback, and of course James Robinson. Travis Etienne, you haven't seen, and don't forget Marvin Jones is a complimentary target to Kirk. So they have some pieces there. Again, the main thing is they got the first win under Peterson. And for all those individuals that said they couldn't work for Trent Baalke, get over it. I mean, I'm sick and tired of hearing that. First of all, Doug Peterson is a pro, and that's exactly what Trevor Lawrence needed, was a guy that won a Super Bowl and knows a position. So all that baloney, I'm not going there. But think about it, 3 conference championships versus the Cowboys with 1. I don't have to say a whole lot. I don't know if I'm really ready to give them the division title, but you know what? You never know. I mean, this team here does have a lot of upside to them. So no, I understand the glory days or the good days. I don't know if they've ever had any glory days, but they've been to the conference. They've been a very formidable franchise for a lot of years. And again, this is a town waiting to erupt. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, and not only that, I think the ace in the hole is Doug Peterson here. He won with Philly. He's a player's coach, and he kind of reminds me of Tom Coughlin. I know Byron Leftwich had a choice to come in there, but they looked at the experience with Doug Peterson. He was run out of Philadelphia.
Right.
And that's the problem. He found a home in Jacksonville, and what a coach. I mean, he's going to install confidence in these guys. You saw yesterday in the locker room, man, they love it.
Well, when you tell Trevor Lawrence, Mark, Avi, and Greg, okay, forget about your freshman year, throw it all away in the toilet. I mean, my goodness, okay, forget about what you learned, okay? You got a few games, you got a few stats on your career. Don't worry, I'll do it all over again. Don't let us forget he was a capable backup quarterback in Green Bay. And, of course, we know what he did in Philadelphia. So, yeah, he'll get a statue there. If he has any kind of legitimate success, there he will. And I think in my mind, Byron Leftwich couldn't work with Trent Baalke. We'll see when and if he ever gets a head coaching job, especially when one is presented in front of you. I want to get to the Tampa Bay Bucs because we only have a few more minutes left in the show. But I felt the Jacksonville one was important because let's face the reality, okay? You know, everybody talked about Carson Wentz. Well, you know what? Carson Wentz is with Ron Rivera. I think he'll be all right there. But now you can't blame him this time. Jim Hurts couldn't get rid of him, and we'll see what happens with Frank Reich. Last team I want to get to is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We saw that they ended up beating the New Orleans Saints 20-10. Tom Brady gets yet another win. So to me, all right, Greg, give us some of your closing thoughts on the Bucs before we call it a night.
Yeah, let's not overreact to the Bucs getting off to sort of a slow start. Brady is still Brady. Godwin will be back. Julio Jones will be back. A couple of their offensive linemen will be back. They'll be just fine come playoff time, and they will be in the playoffs. And a quick comment on Jacksonville: it might sound like crazy talk. They're going to win the division, but 9-8 may win that division, and they got the best quarterback of the 4 in that division.
Absolutely.
That's true. You know what? It's funny how you mentioned that. I think with the Tennessee Titans, I know they're in that division. I wouldn't be surprised to see Malik Willis eventually become the starting quarterback and unseat Ryan Tannehill. And obviously the Houston Texans are relying on a second-year guy. Was it Davis Mills, I think it is?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens there. And who do you have left in that division? You've got the Jacksonville and, of course, Colts. So, you know what? I don't think you're that far off, Mark. I think the division's here for the taking.
Not at all.
More than, and now that I break it down in the context that it is. All right, so let's go with the Buccaneers before we call it a night. All right, Greg, let's go back to them. Everybody gets a crack at the Bucs before we call it a night. Greg, some thoughts about the Bucs?
I'll give you my thoughts on the Bucs. They'll be in the playoffs. They'll get everyone healthy, and as long as Brady is still standing, they'll be there. Not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl, but they'll be in the playoffs.
Mark?
Right now, to me, they're the best team in the NFC. I don't care about a 2-0 record, what they're all about. Find out after 6 weeks where teams settle in on. But what they did to New Orleans, they punched them in their backyard yesterday, and they didn't take nothing. Even though guys got thrown out of the game and stuff, they're showing you that we mean business. They want to get that bad taste out of their mouth that they figured they should have beat the Rams. But by when this thing gets going, I don't think anybody's beating Tampa in the NFC. They're far and above everybody, whether it's the Rams, the defending champs, or anything. They're loaded on offense. Their defense is coming together. And Bowles is a winner. And you're going to really see this. That's the key there. He didn't have the talent he had in New York, but watch out what he does in Tampa now.
Okay, Avi, close it out before I go ahead and wrap it up.
Well, what can I say? It wasn't a very pretty game. You know what? This is the NFL. Anybody can beat anybody on any given day. But the Buccaneers finished it off strong. Defense came through and finished it off like they should. Going into the game, Jameis Winston was a little banged up. It looked like the fatigue really might have gotten a hold of him there at the end of the game, and Buccaneers capitalized on it. It's like I said, it's a long season. Buccaneers, obviously I can see them there. I think maybe their only competition right now, especially after last night's game, may be the Green Bay Packers. They might not have Devontae Adams, but they got a good team going forward. So I think they might give the Buccaneers some competition, but Buccaneers will definitely be in the mix at the end.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about the Buccaneers, they're going to win ugly all year. Their defense is going to carry them, and Tom Brady will be retiring for good if he knows what's good for him personally.
Yeah.
And as long as you got a job that's going to pay you $375 million in the network, it's not the worst thing in the world to keep your family together and make sure that you don't find yourself on the wrong end of one too many hits that will find yourself being knocked into tomorrow in a place you don't want to be. The last thing you want to do is be on the wrong end of all these lawsuits, especially with the fact that the NFL is such a violent sport. So I definitely believe it's Brady's last year. And Todd Bowles, Mark, like you mentioned before, to me, is an underrated coach. I don't hold what happened to him with the Jets against them. And I do believe that Bruce Arians is smart. Hey, you know what? I'll turn it over to Tom Brady so you don't have a bad situation. And an African-American guy takes over a bad situation, and they hold it against them. So, yeah, I think Todd Bowles is a heck of a coach. I hope he does well. And I know that they'll certainly – it'll be interesting to see. I believe Kyle Trask and, I said, Blaine Gabbert are the backup. So we'll see what they do with the position going forward. But Tom Brady will have a pretty good year, add a few more stats to it. A great career already. I'd like to see him go deep in the playoffs, but I hope and pray for his own sake that he doesn't leave the game, injured at all. The last thing you want to do, is retire with dignity. He's 45 years old. Call it a career. I didn't think his first retirement was legitimate anyways. I felt like he had something left on the table. He had $25 million, the money. And, you want to leave when you have the window open, but I think that window was closing. But again, the Buccaneers road to the postseason. I love Leonard Fournette, and the wideouts are banged up. So I'll wait for another show to go deeper into that. Julio Jones, you can never trust him. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, the group. But I like Leonard Fournette, their defense, and Brady. I hope you leave with your 2 feet, that you're leaving standing, and that your personal life gets straight, because I would hate to see something happen to him a lot of ways. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, not only that, when you look at the division, the quarterbacks only are in Carolina with Mayfield and Darnell. So he has a jump on that. And the other thing is he's resurrected wide receivers, and Antonio Brown, Randy Moss, Julio Jones. I mean, I don't put anything past Tom Brady. They want to win a ring. They come to play with Tom Brady. So anything's possible this year.
Mark, you can't resurrect wide receivers, my friend, if they're hurt.
You can't resurrect wide receivers, but the perception with the mindset is totally different. We saw Randy Moss go to Oakland and play in Oakland, and then resurrect his career in New England.
I'm not comparing that situation. I know that was a great move. But if you're going to sit here and tell me that Randy Moss went to New England, but he got hurt the whole time, you don't resurrect injuries. You only resurrect them if they have problems upstairs. You get them in the right system, and they are on the field. The only way that you're productive, Mark, is this. When you get on the field, you're supposed to play on the field and be as productive as you can. If you're off the field, guess what? You're not getting any yards, are you, my friend? Right. So I'm with you there. Mark, I totally get where you're coming from. Brady, Belichick has revitalized a lot of – I could get into all kinds of stuff there. The major requirement when you're playing competitive sports, folks, is play the game, not be on the sideline or on the injured list. If you're on the injured list, you're in deep trouble. So that's where I'm coming from. But again, I think that there's no questioning what Brady's going to do. He's a heck of a quarterback. He didn't win all of these Super Bowls by accident, right? He obviously is a heck of a quarterback. And more importantly, he was a 6th-round pick out of the University of Michigan. You don't have to draft quarterbacks in the first round to hit on him. You can hit them in 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way into the end of the draft. So, but, the reality is the situation is that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they got one shot. And, Mark, you did mention a good point, okay? The quarterbacks in that division aren't great. Jameis Winston is a Tampa Bay Buccaneer cast-off. Don't sit there and tell me you're going to do a whole lot with Marcus Mariota. Sam Darnold is hurt. And Baker Mayfield those guys may not be on the roster next year. What do you got? PJ Walker and Matt Corral, who's been hurt. So nobody knows what's going on. So you want to talk about handing a division by default because the quarterback play is anything but good. That's another situation altogether. So I'm with you. All you guys make a lot of good points. So any parting shots very quickly, Greg, about what stood out for you during this past weekend? I like to have parting shots on every show where everybody has one comment by themselves, and then we call it a night. Go ahead. Greg, give me a parting
What stood out this past weekend was obviously Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle, and they're going to need every bit of them this coming week hosting Buffalo, who has absolutely obliterated Miami the last few seasons. Miami's defense has to find some way to slow down Josh Allen. You're not going to stop Josh Allen, but you just slow him down a little bit.
Mark?
Well, I think Jacksonville, if they had won their first game in Washington, this would have really carried over. I think they got a real fighting chance coming out to Los Angeles. If Herbert doesn't play, they could have been looking down the barrel of a 3-0 start. But I like this team. It's going to be tough in the AFC, but you know what? I'm looking at them to be coming out of this division. And if a 9-8 record is it, maybe it could be a 10-7 record. But I like the direction they're going.
Avi?
Quick, both Jacksonville Dolphins. I truly believe they keep this up. They keep doing what they're doing going forward. Keep the trust within their coach. I can see them in the playoffs, absolutely. Jacksonville Jaguars, same. I think they're doing well. They're really progressing well, but they definitely have a challenge. Even if Herbert's out of the game, they're still going to have to deal with Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and Derwin James. So I think it's going to be a real test for the Jaguars going up against that Chargers defense. But you know what? If they keep doing what they're doing with the game flow, I think they'll be all right. So we'll see what happens.
All right, my closing thoughts are at the game I was at Saturday night. Florida Atlantic University said they had 31,000 people listed as attendance. You play like this, you'd be lucky to get 3,100 people. In my opinion, the scheduling stinks. I like FAU. It's a program very dear to me. Howard Schnellenberger, I worked with him for a lot of years at Miami, as well as FAU was like a father figure to me. And I still remain a part of that program to honor the legacy of Howard Schnellenberger. But I'll just say this about Florida Atlantic. You need to start to get with it with the scheduling, okay? And I'm not sure that Willie Taggart's the answer for that job. I'm really not. He has a $3 million buyout if he leaves, by December 2nd. Maybe there could be a coaching change at some point. I don't know. But, I hate to pile on a little school because they are not very big. But this is you had a chance to prove to the rest of the country that you've made a lot of progress under Taggart, and they laid the biggest darn egg on the planet, and they need to do a whole lot better. Stop scheduling these high school teams or smaller opponents to think you're good. There's only two words I can say when you schedule that poorly, called fool's gold. And what we saw on Saturday night was fool's gold. Do I get hard on teams sometimes? You darn right I am, especially when I saw what I saw there. I'm not big on horror films like, Poltergeist and The Exorcist, but what I saw on Saturday night remind me a lot of those. And Arachnophobia is a spider one, but what I saw Saturday night resembled something along those lines. And I have to tell you, that was an absolute embarrassment what I saw. And I hope for Florida Atlantic's sake that they have a much better showing against the Purdue Boilermakers, because what happened to UCF was an absolute embarrassment. My alma mater, University of South Florida, put up a much better show in Gainesville than what FAU did at home against Central Florida. And that, to me, is the biggest joke. FAU fans, I don't expect you to share this broadcast because you're not going to like me anyways. But there's perception and there's reality. And the perception and the reality was Saturday was a night you wish you didn't have. And CBS Sports Network isn't going to be knocking on your door for an opponent like this if you continue to play this poorly. So
tell us what you really think, Scott.
What's that?
I said, tell us what you really think about it.
Yeah, I was about ready. You took the words right out of my mouth.
I'm not sending this to them. I don't care if I did sell them. They'll know it. They have to look at it. 31,000 was the announced crowd. Okay, if that's how many tickets you sold, I know the weather was nasty there anyways. It is what it is. But you weren't selling. I like the old finger, Mancini. At least it's the forefinger instead of the one that most people don't like. Right, so with that said, okay, I'm going to give everybody a chance and opportunity to let them know where to find you, and then we'll do one more station break to call it night. All right, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, you can get my articles on SouthFloridaTribune.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at GFukes, at Gregory Fuchs.
Avi?
You can find me, NSPN, on Facebook, Avi Greenwald on Facebook, or you can catch me at Greenwald Avi on Twitter.
All right, Madman Mancini, we'll leave you there.
XM203, Sirius 217, WWDB AM 860 out of Philly, and the Pittsburgh Pirate Podcast, where they're probably going broke in New York, spending a week there. But I will tell you this, boys. Who will go further, the Jags or the Dolphins?
Not even a question. Dolphins, absolutely.
I'm taking receipts. I'm taking the
Not
Jags.
even a question.
Well, who knows, Mark? You may be taking the Jags because you're looking to find another podcast in Northern Florida. You might.
That said, the Dolphins could have a better record, but Jacksonville still make the playoffs.
I think the Dolphins make the Super Bowl before the Jags do as well.
Hold on. If there's a podcast to be found, Madman Mancini will find it. All right, let me go ahead and give you our station ID real quick. Love the dialogue with you guys. It's fantastic. Anyway, subscribe to the South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel or visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio. Okay, that's pretty big, Mark. Okay, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have a hard time subscribing through our website, go to youtube.com, look for South Florida Tribune, hit the subscribe button, and you're good to go. You get to hear, see us, and all that other stuff. So, Avi, didn't mean to cut you off, but we had to make sure we get station identification. Any closing thoughts? Good job for all you guys tonight. Very impressed with the effort. I know that we were all over the football map here in the state of Florida. And yes, I only knock Florida Atlantic because I care. I feel like I've been covering that program since 2007, whether you know it or not. I remember the good old days when they played at Lockhart Stadium. They played at Hard Rock Stadium for a while. And I used to go on Sunday calls with Katrina McCormack, a guy from the Sun Sentinel, Marcus Nelson of the Palm Beach Post, and myself. We used to do these Sunday night calls. I used to have dinner with my folks. And to be included on those calls means that Florida Atlantic is a program that stands dear to my heart, and I want to see them do well. I know I spend a lot more time covering the Miami Hurricanes these days, and I went to the Howard Schnellenberger tribute, and I was able to connect with both programs I have in and reconnect with Miami. So I only criticize Florida Atlantic because I care, and I'd love to see this program do well. And I will admit that the major reason I'm covering this program now is because I love Howard Schnellenberger. He was a father figure to me, and I always want to feel in my mind I'm honoring his legacy, not only what he did at Miami, but FAU. And if I could promote it on any platform that I'm involved in, then so be it. It means that much. That's why I'd like to see FAU improve. And they don't get many opportunities to talk about them on a show like this, but at least they had an opportunity to let people know that Florida Atlantic University is a good university. My niece, Bria, goes there, and it's one of the better schools in the state. But hopefully they'll be able to do well. And one other thing before we end it, they have a good basketball program, and they have one of the best baseball programs in the state of Florida as well. The only thing they need there is a much better stadium. So with that said, this concludes this edition of Fire Up Florida. On behalf of Greg Fuchs, Avi Greenwald, and Madman Mancini, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Fire Up Florida, and we will catch you the next time. Good night, everybody. Have a good week.
Good night.